Everyone's talking about ETFs, low fees, easy access, great long-term performance. But what about pensions? Are they outdated or secretly one of the best return-generating tools out there? In this video, we are putting ETFs and pensions head to head. What gives you more in the long run? Which is better for building wealth? And what role does tax play in all of this? By the end of this video, you will know exactly which option generates higher returns and how to combine both smartly. Let's get into it. One of the most common mistakes is that people think if you're investing money in the pension, you're technically not investing money in stocks or ETFs. But that's not true. So let's start with one plan, a pension plan which is called Basis. Another name is Rurup. Okay, how does this plan work? Let's say you're investing 500 euros monthly. You invested money via a pension plan. So you don't invest that money via a bank or any online broker. You invested money via a pension plan in ETFs, different ones for diversification, which generate 7 to 10% profit annually on average. Okay? Now, in the basis, this contribution here becomes fully tax deductible. So you receive 42% back with your tax declaration. Depends on your tax rate now, but for most people, if you're earning well, it's 42%, which is a tax benefit of 210. 42% out of 500. Now you can reinvest that money because you probably don't need that for your standards of living via a bank, online broker, you name it, again in ETFs, which again generates 7 to 10% profit per year. So what happens now? You generate 7 to 10% on the 500, you generate 42% on the 500, and another 7 to 10% on the 210 here. So you can probably imagine that the difference in your wealth building will be enormous, especially if you consider compound interest effect. Okay? The German government is only giving you these tax benefits if you use that money for retirement, which means you can only access that money at age 62. In my opinion, it makes sense because the financial advantage is huge in comparison to a normal ETF. Because in a normal ETF, you're just investing 500, you have 7 to 10% profit, that's it. In the pension plan, you have the same performance, but additionally, you have the tax benefits, which is a guaranteed profit of 42% every year. Plus, you can reinvest that money again, the tax savings which you receive with your tax declaration. So from return perspective, it's definitely the strongest solution in comparison to a normal ETF. Okay? This is a tax benefit of the basis. Let's discuss the tax benefit of the so-called flex pension. How does that work? So let's say you have 500,000 saved in your retirement age. 100,000 euros is your own contribution. And since we have lots of compound interest over the next years until retirement, 400,000 euros would be profit. Okay? If you normally invest in an ETF, you have to pay full 25% capital gains tax on the 400,000 euros here. So you need to pay 100,000 euros on taxes. Okay? 400,000 euros would be net profit after taxes. Okay, this is always tax-free because it's own contribution. This would be capital gain, so you need to pay 25% on the gain. This would be a normal ETF. If you have a flex pension plan, you have same profits, you're investing in ETFs, but now 50% of the profits are also tax-free if you take the lump sum at age 62. Or later. Because German government says if you use that money for retirement age, you have tax benefits. In the flex, you can take that money out anytime, but it makes sense that you take it out at age 62 because 50% of the gains are tax-free, and now you need to pay taxes on the remaining 200,000 euros. So here you have to pay taxes. So this is the only place where you actually pay taxes, okay? So long term, the flex plan and also the basis plan is stronger than the normal ETF investment. We need to add something here, another tax benefit actually. If you have let's do it here. If you have a normal ETF investment, let's say over 30 years, and let's say you have 4 different ETFs, it's super likely that at one point you rebalance your portfolio. Because who knows if these ETFs are still the best ones in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. Or maybe you need to invest with a different strategy because maybe in future you invest less in US and more in China or India or Mexico or Brazil. Since the world is changing, especially right now with a certain pace, it's important that you also adjust your portfolio accordingly. So if you adjust your portfolio, you need to sell stocks to buy new ones, or you need to sell shares to buy new ones. If you sell shares to buy new ones, you have to pay taxes because you realize profits. So every time you rebalance your portfolio, you need to pay 25% taxes on capital gains, which destroys your compound interest effect, especially for long-term investments. In a pension plan, both basis and flex, you can rebalance tax-free because the money doesn't come back to your bank account, it still stays on the pensions account. Even if it stays in your online broker account here, you are still taxed because you realize profits. And especially for long-term investments, if you invest for 30 years and let's say you rebalance 5 times, 6 times every 5 or 6 years because the world is changing and you want to catch trends and you want to invest accordingly, well, this would hurt a lot, especially for your long-term investments. So keep that in mind when you compare. What's the solution now? Well, I'm not against any ETF investment, don't get me wrong, but typically you plan as follows. Let's say you want to retire at age 55. Or let's phrase it differently, you want to be financially independent, you name it. Okay? So at age 55, you know you've made it, you don't have to work anymore, the struggle is over, now you can do what you really enjoy. Okay? So 55. Then age 62 is important. And maybe age 67 is important. Here you receive the statutory pension, but I'm not quite sure if you really receive that money at age 67. At age 62 onwards, you use that money from your basis and your flex. This is really the money you need when you don't work anymore. Now from 55 to 62, this money can be used out of your savings, out of your ETF investments. Okay, we can also call it X, anything which is less than 62. If you need money for such a period, you just use that money from your direct investment, your normal ETF investment without the pension plan. Okay, so let's say you have 1 million in your account at age 55. What can you do now? Just as an easy, superficial example, you can use 500,000 euros here, which is probably not needed, over the next 7 years, if you need that money. And then you can use the rest here. However, if you do it this way, then you probably don't have 500,000 here. And if you invest the same amount, including taxes, you probably have 700,000 euros here probably even more if you invested that money with a pension plan. So we are probably talking about the wealth advantage. Obviously depends on age and contribution, but it's typically 50% more if you use a tax optimized version, which makes a huge difference in the end if you have significantly more in assets when you retire. Okay? So now you see that most of your money is probably not needed before 62 anyways, at least from your ETF investments, okay? Within these years, obviously before 62, before you retire, you close all your real estate loans. So you're debt-free, you generate passive income out of real estate, maybe you don't have to pay for any mortgage for the house you're living in. Now you see that if you have another 1 million saved up long-term, well, do you really need that money from 50 to 62? Or let's say from 55 to 62 while you're working? Well, probably you don't need that money anyways. So if you don't need that money, well, then it also makes sense that some of your savings contribution is actually invested long term to generate the highest profits. Because I totally get it. It's annoying that the tax benefit only comes in place at 62. It's annoying here that you can only access that money at age 62. It's locked because of the tax benefits here. But if the profit is significantly higher and you have 50% more in assets, then it makes sense to wait, because you probably wait anyways, since most of your money will not be needed until age 62. Okay? And now you can structure accordingly. You can use some money for your real estate investments. You can use some money for your normal stock and ETF investments. But in my opinion, some portion should also be real pension investment, because otherwise you never know how much money you actually have for your retirement and how much you have for anything else. So ETFs are a fantastic tool for flexibility and transparency, no question. But when it comes to pure returns, especially over the long run, pension plans often come out on top. Why? Massive tax advantages. The key, you don't have to choose one. A strong financial strategy often includes both, using ETFs for flexibility and pensions for optimized long-term growth. If this was helpful, drop a like, hit subscribe, and let me know in the comments. Are you team ETF, team pension, or both? Thanks for watching, and don't forget, long-term thinking always wins.